Good Shabbos. It's nice to be here. I just want to share a thought and leave you with a question and then discuss it and finalize it after the next Aliyah. The Torah reading today that we're all familiar with is the rebellion of Korach, as Rabbi Drash mentioned earlier. And in this rebellion, Korach challenges the leadership of Aaron and of Moses, claiming they're old school, it's time for a new generation to come up. And what he also does is he criticizes not just Moses and not just Aaron, but actually the Torah. And so in a very real sense, he is criticizing the Ribbono Shel Olam. He's also criticizing the Torah. And what ends up happening is that after a couple of days, what occurs is there's an earthquake. We know the story. And all of the 250 followers of Korach, Datan and Aviran, another couple of guys, and all of their property gets swallowed up in an earthquake. And it becomes clear that who was right? Moses and Aaron. And who was wrong was, of course, Korach and his followers. But it was also the way in which he challenged the authority of Moses. There's nothing wrong. Judaism promotes conversations and dialogue. But the way that Korach handled it was condemned by our tradition. We come forward about 1,000 years to another argument, another disputation between two prominent rabbis. And we are reminded of these rabbis every time we walk past a door in a mezuzah that's at an angle. Hillel and Shammai. And according to a very lovely section in the Gemara, it tells us that the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai were arguing over a piece of law, not just for an afternoon, not just for a couple of days, but for 3 whole years. We're told Shammai and Hillel went at it with each other. And then after 3 years, I guess God looked down and said, enough already. A bat kol is sounded. A bat kol would be a heavenly voice. And what does the heavenly voice say about Hillel and Shammai? It says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, that both the words of Hillel and the words of Shammai are the words of the holy God. They're the living words of God. But then the text tells us what? V'halacha keveit Hillel. That both of the teachings of these prominent rabbis were in a sense spiritually equivalent, but the halacha, Jewish law, followed who? Hillel. What bothers you about that, or what question comes up from that? Come on, welcome me back with a response here. What's that? Okay, why wasn't Shammai's become halacha? But what else is puzzling about it? That's precisely. If both of their teachings are told to be divrei Elohim chayim, are both sanctified, they both have the OU from the Almighty, why does the law follow one and not the other? It should follow then both, perhaps. We're going to continue with the next Aliyah, and I want you to think about that. And after the next Aliyah, I want you to tell me, why do you think the halacha in virtually all cases, with very few exceptions, always follows Beit Hillel, the teachings of Hillel, not the teachings of Shammai? All right? If both the teachings of Hillel and Shammai have the same stamp of approval from the heavens, why was Hillel favored in terms of ultimately halachic decisions in our tradition?
Shammai was too difficult to follow, and it would be easier for the people to follow Hillel.
All right, that's good. Shammai was a kind of ornery fellow, but Hillel was not. Other thoughts? Yes?
I think maybe it was the way that they each presented the argument, and maybe you respected the other guy's argument
they argued. Okay, very good. We're getting close to the answer. Any others? I'll take one more opinion. Oh, yes.
Hillel was a little more flexible and inclusive.
Okay, more flexible and inclusive. You know, there are those that think perhaps maybe Hillel was smarter than Shammai. That's not, of course, the case. Some arguments are that Hillel, in a sense, had a greater PR staff than Shammai did. And, you know, there's some legitimate concern, legitimate understanding that perhaps that was it too, presented himself differently. But what we learn in, again, the continuation of this beautiful little episode in the Gemara is we are told the following. The question that I asked is the question that's asked also in the Talmud. Why Hillel rather than Shammai? And the answer we're told is Nochi, the school of Hillel, Nochin va'aluvin hein. They were pleasant and they were nice, but not only that, but they studied the teachings of Shammai. But not only that, they studied the teachings of Shammai before they even studied their own teachings, the teachings of Hillel. And so we are told that is the reason. They were mentioned. They were good people. Now we can look back and look at the argument, the differing opinion between Korach and Moshe. And we are told in Jewish tradition that that is not the way to properly argue. The proof, of course, was he was ornery, he was nasty, and the ground opened up and swallowed him. But what we learn from Hillel and from Shammai is that even though there was merit in all of the arguments, what ultimately trumped the disagreement and who emerged spiritually victorious was not so much the substance of the argument, but how one argued, and the temperament of Beit Hillel, the temperament of the school of Hillel, who were kind and who were thoughtful and who were respectful. Now, if we look today at abortion, and we're not talking about it, but if we look at the issue of abortion, or we look at the differing opinions that a husband and a wife can have, and if we acknowledge that there are many arguments and many disputations that go beyond abortion and beyond husbands and wives arguing, then we have to understand, how do we do it? How do we do it? And we learn that we argue not the way Korach argued, but we argue the way Hillel and Shammai argued. And that when the day is done and you have your conversations or your debates, civility and menschlichkeit must prevail. I conclude with a Chinese saying. And the Chinese saying is, he who raises his voice first in an argument loses the argument. And I leave you with that thought. There are differing opinions that all of us share and all of us have, but civility must be the spirit in which we dialogue and respectfully disagree. We continue now.
It is just so good to be back with all of you this morning after what was a fabulous trip to Israel. I lived up to my promise. I was nary milchig for more than a few hours at a time. We ate in the best restaurants, had the most wonderful food, traveled the entire country from Jerusalem up. So much wonderful group bonding, fabulous experiences. And yet, while I was in Israel, I kept thinking of this scene from the Broadway musical Hamilton. It's when Thomas Jefferson returns from having missed the entire Revolutionary War, and he says, "What'd I miss while I was away? What did I miss while I was away?" And so while I was on the plane, I had some time to, on my phone, hammer out a few reflections, both on Israel and the state of our country over the past number of days. And the story I want to begin by sharing with you this morning was when I was on Ben Yehuda Street shopping for souvenirs for my kids. I went around to just about every store, got some Winnipeg Jets Keepote for Zev, and then found myself in Steimatsky, which is the equivalent of Borders or Barnes & Noble, if you remember what those are anymore here. I was hoping to find a copy of the book Fancy Nancy in Hebrew for my daughter. Well, as it turns out, Fancy Nancy has not yet been translated into Hebrew, and so I asked the bookseller if she had some more ideas to share with me. And she pointed me to a series of biographies of famous Jewish women written in Hebrew. On the top of the pile was Chana Senesh. Underneath that was Golda Meir. That's when she turned to me and said, "You know, unfortunately, we are all out of Ruth Bader Ginsburg." She told me she sold no fewer than 10 copies in the few days alone. She then looked at me and frowned. It's really been a terrible week. Reflecting on this journey and the beautiful journey I have just returned from, and this particular story, I want to share with you this Shabbat 2 lessons that I took away from Israel, one positive and one negative. The first lesson that I saw in Israel, and one that touched me and continues to be resonant in my life and no doubt yours, is that, thank God, on this trip I recalled, there is a deep sense of shared values between Americans and Israelis. When things happen in America, like Supreme Court decisions, these things reverberate all over Israel. It's not just on TV, but everybody talks about them because we share a relationship with one another. I recall the beautiful relationship between Jonathan and David in the Bible. Nafsho kshura b'nafsho, our souls are intertwined with one another. This is because Israelis and Americans, specifically commemorated American Jews, share all of the same values with each other. How else can we explain the selling out of a children's book about Ruth Bader Ginsburg? She's not an Israeli. She's an American jurist who is widely admired by Israelis. And how amazing is it, by the way, that there's even a Hebrew book series about a Jewish heroine that includes not only Chana Senesh and Golda Meir, but no doubt Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman who I would probably guess could barely read Hebrew herself. It is because committed American Jews and Israelis know that Jewish peoplehood is an idea that transcends where we live. That's the positive takeaway from my trip. The negative moment, of course, stems from the reason that the book was sold out in the first place. As I said, what did I miss while I was gone? For Americans, this has been a challenging week, not only because of Roe v. Wade being overturned or because of the school prayer bill, which will allow coaches to force prayer on Jewish kids, make no mistake, in high schools, but because of the lessons of what these 2 cases sorely point out to us as American Jews. Walking around Israel for an incredible 9 days, I was reminded that Israel is a Jewish country. Decisions are Jewish. The culture is Jewish. But with this decision and the school prayer decision, it is now clear that in America there are forces that would like us to believe that this is not a country for all. The forces that won this past week want this to be a Christian country. That is so painful for me to say from this bima. In Israel, Jewish values do not come into conflict with the laws of the land. the McDonald's are kosher. And even if they're not going to serve you a cheeseburger. I got a kick out of that moment on the trip when I saw somebody not of our group walk into a shawarma place in Jerusalem and saying, "Can I have cheese with my hamburger?" And the guy said, "This is a kosher restaurant. Sorry, we don't serve cheeseburgers here." Birthright kids. The school breaks in Israel are the Jewish holidays. Christian and Muslim holidays are also respected because Israel is a democratic state. Yet in America this past week, subtly or not, the forces that believe Jewish voices shouldn't matter prevailed. That stings us very deeply, especially in Georgia, where we must now abide by a law that is contrary to halakha and our religious beliefs as a Jewish people. Which is why I want to say to my Christian pro-life friends this morning, in all of the time that you were protesting pro-life, did you stop to ask and consider that abortions are legal in Jewish law? See, Rabbi Lewis, you weren't going to talk about abortion, but I have no problem talking about it this morning. The answer is no doubt the same, by the way, as when I asked the Pope High School leaders and administrators and PTA parents why they plan to clean up to protest anti-Semitism on Shabbat. They also didn't think about us at all in that case. They've learned from it since. Jewish law teaches that when the life of a mother is at stake, a pregnancy can be terminated up until the moment before the head comes out of the womb. But in Georgia, soon that law will just be 6 weeks. Say what you would like, Roe v. Wade was based on faulty jurisprudence. The Equal Protection Clause, RBG herself said, would have been better. All you need to know this week is that the 2 Jewish justices on the court were not in the majority. In Israel, we saw Judaism everywhere we went. So much of it was so perfect. We prayed in a Masorti movement-run service at the Western Wall at the Kotel. We listened to a beautiful choir at the Great Synagogue in Jerusalem on Shabbat morning. We walked and we hiked around the land of our ancestors. We even went to a tent where a pretend Abraham with a really long beard welcomed us like it was medieval times into his tent for dinner and shared his story. And there was also so much of the Judaism we experienced in Israel that, let's call it imperfect. As we drove around Israel and we experienced geography of the land, it was incredibly clear and abundantly clear to all of us that peace with the Palestinians is going to be near impossible. I reconnected with a friend in Israel I had not seen in many years. He's begun to work for a satellite company. He tells me that his satellite company incentivizes Jews working on the high holidays. They give their employers a month's pay to the person who works on Yom Kippur. And my friend Ari Hasit, many of you met Rabbi Hasit, officiated a bar mitzvah at the Egalitarian Kotel, the same Kotel where we had a service on Friday night, and was harassed by Haredim, his siddur ripped to shreds by people who believe that they were not Jewish enough. But here's the thing about Israel. Israel is our country. It's our culture. And whether we like the decisions that Israelis make or not, they are fundamentally Jewish decisions that are taking place. They are congruous with values in our tradition. Liot am chofshi ba'artzenu be'eretz Zion u'Yerushalayim, to be a free people in the land of Israel. But what is beyond frustrating about what I missed while I was in Jerusalem, beyond the chaos this decision has now created for our country, what upsets me the most is that the American Jewish voice has not only gone unseen or unheard, it was ignored. And what I want to know is what happens in Georgia when a Jewish woman decides she wants to terminate her pregnancy and is told she can't get it. and she says, "You are infringing on my right to practice my religion." I imagine we'll be back in court relitigating this pretty soon. I also want to know what will happen when a Jewish doctor stands up and says, "You know what? It's my right as a Jewish doctor to practice my religious beliefs and terminate this pregnancy. And the government is infringing on my religion." Folks, I don't know what's going to happen in America. But in Israel, I know exactly what would happen. Judaism happens. In fact, the news was announced in Israel this week that the government made it easier with new regulations on abortion, making it easier for women to participate in clinical trials based on the science, and also the halakha, the Jewish law, because Israel is a Jewish country. When we vote in the World Zionist Congress elections, and our group visited that headquarters in Israel on our trip, we realized just how much power we have to exercise our voices collectively. Or when we make Aliyah, and there were lots of people on our trip who talked about making Aliyah in light of the decision, we become citizens of Israel, and our voices matter. I want to thank you for waiting for me to have some of this discussion. I'm not going to tell you this Shabbos that everything is going to be all right. It's not. But what I can tell you this Shabbat is that after an incredible week, and I want to tell you about so many more of the great experiences I had over Kiddush, and I hope you will come with me on the next trip. I want to tell you two things and conclude with this. First, that Israel loves us, we love Israel, and Israel shares in our frustration. And second, even though the forces that think that Judaism doesn't matter in this country have prevailed, we always know as Jews living in America that we will have a place where our voices matter. That is the state of Israel, our home. Never forget it. Shabbat Shalom.